welcome back. It's April 5th, and the Pittsburgh Penguins have just defeated the New York Rangers. Final score 5-2, and they clinch home ice advantage for the playoffs. And as well, the Flyers defeated the Buffalo Sabres 2-1, so that makes it official. The Penguins and the Flyers will meet in the first round of the 2012 Stanley Cup Playoffs. We've got Tim Stamp in studio here to discuss the series and just kind of the last game and the next game against the Flyers and how this is all going to play out. So with that, we welcome in Tim Stamp. How are you doing tonight, Tim?
Good. How are you?
Doing wonderful, especially after the win tonight. And let's go all the way back to the last game with the Pens and Flyers. It was on NBC, obviously caught national attention for what happened in the last minute or so. Let's go back to all the way back to the Braden Shen cross-check on Sidney Crosby. Of course, we saw Crosby kind of going back to the bench after a shift. Now, they said that there was some kind of slash or hack or whack with Crosby on Shen there. I got to say, I didn't see that at all. What I did see was Shen kind of way after the play, I'd say 6 or 7 seconds after the play, as Sid was going back to the bench and had his defenses lowered. It gives him a cross-check right kind of upper back neck area. And then, of course, we see the fourth line come out, and Peter Laviolette takes exception to that. Is that something that you think was necessary? Why would Peter Laviolette take exception to the fourth line coming out? I mean, it's a line on the roster.
Well, I think he felt like it was an intentional thuggery, and I think that he felt like it was an intentional hit on one of his star players, which he didn't appreciate, and I don't think any team would appreciate one of their star players being hit like that. But at the same time, that's the kind of hit that Joe Vitale makes on a regular basis, regardless of what your name is, and that's one of the things that we love about Joe Vitale. So I would expect Joe Vitale to play from whistle to whistle, and that's the way he played. By that same token, Sid did admit after the game that that particular team, they bring the worst out of him. So he admits that he probably did take a couple whacks at Shen. I didn't actually see them. But he's admitted to the fact that he's no saint and that he's done these types of things before, and again that this team brings out the worst in him. So I'm not. I think it's hockey. It's a rivalry. I think it's something that's it's going to make this even sweeter in the playoffs. But I don't think it's really anything to worry about.
Hey, and you know one thing too, it goes not just for the players. Not only do the players bring out the worst in each other, but the teams bring out the worst in each other. And that's been a long-standing rivalry all the way back since the Penguins were founded. And through the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, it's always been one of those rivalries. And of course then, by that same token, as far as putting out the fourth line goes, you could make that argument against Laviolette that why was he putting Daniel Briere out there in a 6-4 game in the final minute? I mean, what's the point of that? You're trying to run up the score. What do you think of his decision to put Briere out there in the last 60 seconds?
Well, I think it was a bad decision to make, and I think it actually, I think it left a little bit of a bad taste in some of the players' mouths on the Penguins bench, and I might personally not have noticed it, except for the fact that after the game, Sidney Crosby actually made mention of the fact that he was on the ice in the first place. By making a comment. I think his comment was, well, maybe he shouldn't have been out there. So to me, that comment made it obvious that the players, the players on the bench had taken notice of the fact that Briere was there. So I think they did take exception to that.
And of course, then we have Peter Laviolette with his antics, acting like a 6-year-old breaking a stick over the glass. Now, he gets a $10,000 fine for that, so that's hitting the pocket pretty good. That's 4 times the amount that any player is allowed to be charged. So, and I think it's a good fine because you're breaking a stick over the glass. It could have gone so many different ways, and it could have gone badly in so many different ways. I mean, obviously the stick ended up in the Pens bench, but you think about it, it could have flown into the crowd and knocked someone's eye out. So it was just an idiotic thing for him to do, and really kind of not out of character for Peter Laviolette. I mean, we see him get emotional on a game-to-game basis, and we obviously saw that earlier this year with what he did with Steve Ott, trying to pick a fight with Steve Ott. So, but what do you make of his comments calling Dan Bylsma gutless, especially after what he pulled?
Well, I think that sometimes when you don't have enough skill, you have to fight with less intelligence, and I think he's a caveman in some ways. I think he knows he has a team that isn't they're not necessarily gonna out hit us. They're certainly not gonna outskate us. They don't have more skill than we do, so with that team, it's a pretty one-dimensional, we're going to grind you to death kind of a team. And I think that with him, he has to get any advantage that he can. So I think this is something that makes him look like the captain of his team, the captain of his ship. It gets his team rallied, and it brings them to a new level. It sparks the team to be able to take on what I believe is a much more talented and a much higher class team than his team. So I think some of this was just theatrics to kind of pump his own team up and bring them up to the Penguins level.
Well, it was, one of the things that I did like is that Tony Granato kind of stepped in for Bilesma. Kind of said, you're not going to talk to my coach like that. And he got on the boards and actually confronted Laviolette, which, of course, afterwards, Mike Milbury had some comments telling Dan Bilesma to take off his skirt. I actually kind of liked Dan Bilesma's response to that. I mentioned it earlier in the show about, he said, I wasn't wearing a blue skirt, I was wearing a blue suit, and it was it's kind of funny that he responded that way. It was very dry. I don't think anyone really caught it, but yeah, I mean, Bilesma acts with such class, which is so different from what Laviolette does, and of course we saw that a little bit with Tortorella tonight doing the same sort of thing, but going into Saturday's game against the Flyers, some would say that the score is kind of going to be a secondary story to what's actually going to maybe transpire on the ice. Do you think that's the case, and do you think the Pens will be able to come out with a win Saturday?
I think it's actually going to be a pretty ugly game. I think it's going to be a game where there's going to be some fights. I think you're going to see Sid getting a lot less ice time. I think you're going to see a lot of our top players getting a lot of time off the ice on Saturday, and I think some of the reasons for that, I think there's going to be some chippiness. There's at that point, we already know who our opponent's going to be. They know who their opponent's going to be. We're going to have home ice locked up, so there's really nothing to play for at that point except for pride. So, yeah, I would expect on Saturday that there's going to be some theatrics. I would expect that there's going to be some goonery, and I don't think that's something that they can afford. Because to be honest with you, I don't think they really have too many people that are going to be beating Asham or England. But at the same time, it's certainly not something we can afford either, because we can't lose in Asham or in England, especially England.
Well, after the last game on NBC, this rivalry got more national attention. And I think a lot of people, not just Pens and Flyers fans, but people around the NHL now are very, very excited to see this playoff series. And I think you could make the argument that this will probably be the most physical matchup in the entire playoffs. I mean, maybe you could look at Boston and Ottawa and say, that might get a bit chippy at times, but I don't think it's going to be anything close to where the Pens and the Flyers are. What do you think are some keys for the Pens to be able to grind out the Flyers and outskill the Flyers and just generally outplay the Flyers over a 7-game span?
Well, with the Penguins, I believe that there are quite a few keys, but I think the number one thing that they have to do is they have to forget that they're stars. They have to be willing to grind. They have to be willing to get in there and get into the dirty areas. Forget the perfect pass. Forget the perfect play. Put the puck on the net. Grind. Get into the dirty areas. Stand in the crease. Deflect the pucks. It's not rocket science. You're on ice. You're on skates. You're passing a puck. And I think sometimes they overcomplicate what they need to do. And I think in the playoffs especially, the most important thing you can do is to keep your fundamentals in front of you. Keep everything in front of you. Keep your fundamentals strong. And I think if you do that, that's the most important part of it. I think the other part of it is to make their team one-dimensional. Make the Flyers one-dimensional. Put Giroux on an island. And take people like Scott Hartnell off their game. Just hit him enough so that make his ribs sore enough so that he doesn't want to hit you, and take him out of the crease, take him out of the dirty areas, stop him from wanting to grind. And then with Yager, forget the name on the back of his jersey, forget the fact that he's a legend, forget the fact that he's anybody. Give him no respect. Make him use that speed that he no longer possesses. Stay right up on him. That's a problem that I've seen Orpik have over the last couple of months, is he's got terrible gap control. So I think with a guy like Yager, if you stay right on him and he doesn't have the ability to pass, and you knock Hartnell around enough so that he doesn't want to really get into the dirty areas and stand in the crease, then I think you make this team all Giroux. And I think with Giroux, Where he's deficient is he can't hit, he won't go to the dirty areas, and he can't create his own game. So I think those are the big keys to the victory with the Flyers and the Pens.
And I think clearing out the crease, you make a really good point, because Wayne Simmonds has 3 goals against the Pens this year, and he's really been somebody who's just been a thorn in our side, and to get him out of the crease would be a really good thing to do, because that's where he gets all of his goals, off of deflections and off of little rebounds and things like that. So Wayne Simmonds is certainly going to be key to stopping the Philadelphia Flyers as well. Now in net, we obviously, Ilya Brzgarlov came back the other night, got lit up by the Rangers. It's kind of unexpected. You don't know what you're going to get from Brzgarlov, because he's had stretches in the year where, I mean, he, in his own words, used at the beginning of the year, "I'm lost in the woods. It's like I don't know what I'm doing." And then, he went on this stretch recently where he looked like the Ilya Brzgarlov of old, of the Phoenix days, of the Anaheim days. So you never really know what you're going to get from Ilya Brzgarlov. What would you expect to see? Would you expect to see the Ilya Brzgarlov who's underachieving and not worth his contract? Or do you expect to see the Phoenix Ilya Brzgarlov who's worth every penny?
I'm going to say he's going to be the underachiever, and the reason that I'm going to say that is that this particular goaltender is very cerebral. He's the type of goaltender that doesn't rely as much on his physical skill as he does on his mental strength. And this is a guy that needs all of the poise and all of the confidence that he can possibly muster to stay on a streak, to stay out of a rut. This is the kind of guy that once he gets a little something in his head, he hits the ground face first. So I think with this last loss that he just had, where he got lit up, I think that's going to really, especially since it's one of the last games in the season, I think that's really going to carry over. My hope is that he plays in the last game and gets lit up again. But I think that last loss coming off of an injury, that's certainly going to plague him, I believe, because, again, he's one of those types of guys that once something gets in his head, he really suffers from it.
And, you could make an argument that that's good starts are a huge key to the series, too, because if you get a couple goals in the net early, that's going to get in his head. That's going to cause him to give up a lot more and a lot more space and time. Sometimes goaltenders will come too far out of the crease and won't be able to get the right angle. I've seen Ilya Brzgarlov do that time and time again this year, so maybe you get a couple pucks in the net early and you throw him off his game to some degree, and in any case, it's going to be a really good, really physical matchup. Do you think that a physical matchup early on in the playoffs like this could wear the Penguins down in the second and third rounds?
Well, actually, I think you've got two choices. You either play a team like that in the second or third round, or you play them up front. And I think that you're a lot better off playing them when you're fully healthy, and you're a lot better off playing them when they're not fully healthy, and they're not fully healthy right now. And I think you're a lot better off playing them when you're still fresh. And I think, the deeper you get into the playoffs, I think the easier you want the opponent to be, obviously. So I think we're facing them at the perfect time of the season. I think we're fully healthy, we're fully manned, and I don't think they are. And I think actually I think this is the best thing that could have happened for the Penguins.
Well, speaking of the brackets that you brought up earlier, one final question for you. Where do you have Philly and Pittsburgh in the brackets? How many games, and who's going to win the series?
I have Pittsburgh winning the series 4-2.
Pittsburgh wins the series 4-2. All right, that's going to be it for tonight's show. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Have a great night and a great week.